Why do we keep searching for meaning in things that disappear with time? And what if I told you that everything the world calls success is nothing more than a breath, an illusion that fades away? The book of Ecclesiastes begins with a statement that discomforts. Vanity of vanities, everything is vanity. But far from being a pessimistic message, it is a spiritual key that opens the door to a more conscious, fuller, and eternal life. In a world that idolizes pleasure, fame, and control, Ecclesiastes confronts us with the truth that few dare to say. True wisdom is not in accumulating, but in fearing God and living with purpose. If you've ever wondered why you're here, this message is for you. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments, "The fear of the Lord is my wisdom." Your participation helps more people discover the truth that transforms the soul, time, and the meaning of life. The wise do not ignore the cycles of life. They honor them. Ecclesiastes reminds us that there is a time for everything, Ecclesiastes 3:1, a phrase that is not only poetic, but deeply revealing. There is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to plant and a time to harvest. Ignoring these divine rhythms is like swimming against the current of purpose. Understanding the right time for everything is learning to walk at God's rhythm and not the anxiety of our own desires. When we accept this, a serenity is born within us that is not broken by waiting nor shaken by hurry. Time is not our enemy, but a tool that God uses to mature our hearts. Sometimes seasons of silence are more productive than frantic activity. Mature faith knows that even when it seems like nothing is happening, God is still working in the invisible. Learning to respect the process is a sign of wisdom and spiritual surrender. Every moment has its purpose, even those that seem empty. Time in God's hands is never wasted. Ecclesiastes also speaks to us about the value of perseverance. In 11:6, Solomon encourages us to sow both in the morning and in the evening, not knowing which seed will prosper. The life of the believer is not predictable, but it is full of meaning when lived from a place of trust. We should not fear the future, but trust in the one who already resides in it. Every effort, even small, has the potential to bear eternal fruit. And that is a hope that does not disappoint. In a world where injustice screams louder than equity, Ecclesiastes comforts us with an eternal truth. God will judge the righteous and the wicked. Ecclesiastes 3:17. This certainty should not lead us to passivity, but to faithfulness. Even if we don't understand why the wicked prosper and the righteous suffer, we trust that there is a just judge who forgets no tear and ignores no act of evil. The time for judgment will come, and it will be perfect. Throughout the book, Solomon emphasizes that the wise heart knows how to discern the times. Ecclesiastes 8:5. This goes beyond knowledge. It is spiritual sensitivity. Knowing when to speak and when to be silent, when to act and when to wait, is the fruit of a heart that listens to God more than to its emotions. The wise do not move by impulses, but by revelation. This ability to discern is not acquired through books, but through prayer, humility, and communion with the Holy Spirit. Ecclesiastes also gives us an urgent call to live with excellence. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Ecclesiastes 9:10. Life is not a dress rehearsal. Each day is unique and irreplaceable. We cannot indefinitely postpone what we know we should do today. Living with purpose means living without leaving empty spaces of intention. It is not about doing much, but doing what we must with all our heart, because in the grave there are no more projects. And finally, the wise man observes that success is not always on the side of the strong or the swift. Time and chance happen to all. Ecclesiastes 9:11. This observation shatters the myth that control is in our hands. It is not just about effort, but about grace. There are moments when God interrupts human logic to reveal his sovereignty, and when we understand this, we stop competing and begin to trust. The meaning of life is not in running faster, but in walking with the one who knows the destination. The wisdom that saves the soul. The wisdom in Ecclesiastes is not abstract theory nor an intellectual luxury. It is a vital necessity. The wise man affirms that wisdom gives life to those who have it. Ecclesiastes 7:12. While money may offer momentary shade, only wisdom has the power to preserve the soul. It is not about accumulating information, but about having a teachable heart. capable of discerning the eternal in the midst of the fleeting. It is this wisdom that frees us from destructive decisions, protects us from pride, and leads us to the inner peace that the world cannot give. Solomon humbly declares a truth that many ignore. Certainly there is no righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. Ecclesiastes 7:20. This confession is not pessimism, but freedom. It frees us from the burden of perfection. It reminds us that we all need mercy. No one walks through life without stumbling, and it is there that wisdom acts as a guide and comfort. Recognizing our fragility is not weakness. It is the first step toward an authentic life, dependent on God. In Ecclesiastes 8:7 it says, "No one knows what will happen. Who can tell him when it will occur?" This question reveals a truth that challenges human logic. We have no control over the future, and yet we constantly seek guarantees. Wisdom teaches us to let go of that illusory control and to trust that God is already in tomorrow, that He holds the unknown. Only from that surrender can we live with serenity. We may not know everything, but we can know the one who knows everything. The heart of the wise discerns the time and the judgment. Ecclesiastes 8:5. Knowing when to act and when to wait is more valuable than any technical skill. Wisdom does not hurry, it listens, it observes, it prays. A wise heart does not react out of emotion, but responds from discernment. This spiritual sensitivity is cultivated in silence, in intimacy with God, in the humility of one who acknowledges their limits. This is how we learn to walk in God's timing, not our own. Ecclesiastes also exhorts us to act diligently. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. Ecclesiastes 9:10. This wisdom is not passive. It is a wisdom that works, that seizes today as an irreplaceable gift. Procrastination is the enemy of purpose. God calls us to live with intention, with passion, with commitment. There is no project too small or task insignificant when done for the Lord. In every act of excellence, there is an echo of worship. But it also reminds us that success is not always the result of merit. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Ecclesiastes 9:11. This observation dismantles pride and teaches us dependence. For even the most prepared may fail, and the least expected may triumph. Why? Because life is not in the hands of chance, but in the hands of God. This wisdom makes us humble, compassionate, and grateful. Knowing that everything good is a gift, not a right, changes our attitude toward life. Finally, Ecclesiastes 10:1 warns us that a little folly can spoil much wisdom. A single mistake, an imprudent word, a proud attitude can ruin a reputation built with effort. This lesson is an urgent call to vigilance, to consistency between what we believe and what we live. True wisdom is shown in the details. It is not enough to have good ideas. We must have a pure heart, because a valuable perfume can be ruined by a simple dead fly. The judgment of God and true justice. One of the most challenging truths of Ecclesiastes is that human justice does not always reflect divine justice. Often, we see the wicked prosper while the righteous suffer. Solomon clearly expresses this. There are righteous people to whom it happens as if they did the works of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens as if they did the works of the righteous. Ecclesiastes 8:14. This apparent chaos confronts us, but it is not a cause for despair. It is an invitation to trust beyond what is visible, because even though justice on earth may seem unbalanced, God's judgment is undeniable, precise, and eternal. Wisdom teaches that we should not live for human approval, nor be guided by immediate rewards. God judges the heart, not appearances. In His time, every act will be revealed and weighed in His balance. This understanding transforms the way we live. It no longer matters so much what the world applauds, and it starts to matter what heaven approves. Living with this awareness frees us from resentment and strengthens us amid injustices. It makes us faithful sowers, even if the harvest takes time. We also find in Ecclesiastes warnings for those who plan evil against others. He who digs a pit will fall into it. Ecclesiastes 10:8. This poetic image reveals a spiritual reality. Every action has a consequence. Whoever lives sowing discord, destruction, or betrayal will end up trapped in their own trap. It is divine justice acting with precision, even in silence. We do not need to seek revenge or defend ourselves with our own hands. God takes care of every cause. He repays with perfect justice. This justice is also expressed in the small things. Wisdom even guides our hidden intentions. It is not enough to act well outwardly if the heart is contaminated. Solomon insists that fearing God and keeping His commandments is the whole duty of man. Ecclesiastes 12:13. This fear is not terror but reverence. It is living knowing that we are before the God who sees all, knows all, and will judge all. There is no act invisible to Him, nor any injustice that will go unanswered. Ecclesiastes teaches us that, although we do not know the day or the hour, God will bring every work into judgment. Ecclesiastes 12:14. This judgment is not based on appearances, but on truth. And this should be a reason for hope, not fear. Because the God who judges is also the God who loves, forgives, and guides. Knowing that our works will be evaluated compels us to live with purpose, to care for what we sow, and to seek a life that pleases the Lord more than the world. And if judgment is inevitable, wisdom lies in preparing for it. Not with servile fear, but with a surrendered life. There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. Therefore, each day is an opportunity to correct, forgive, love, and build a legacy that can withstand the fire of eternal judgment. It is not about living obsessed with perfection, but aware that every decision is a seed. Some germinate here, others in eternity. Finally, Solomon reminds us that the spirit returns to God and the body to the dust. Ecclesiastes 12:7. This return is inevitable, and it confronts us with a compelling truth. We own nothing, not even ourselves. Death is not the end, but the beginning of the encounter with the eternal judge. Knowing this should not create fear but urgency. Urgency to live in a way that, when that day comes, we can present ourselves before God with a heart full of faith and hands full of good works. The value of work and true enjoyment. The book of Ecclesiastes presents a unique view of work. It does not idealize it, but it does not despise it either. Solomon acknowledges that human effort alone does not fill the soul, but at the same time declares that, enjoying the good of all his labor, this is the gift of God. Ecclesiastes 3:13. The key is understanding that work is not the end, but a means to honor God. Working with purpose and gratitude turns the ordinary into worship. It doesn't matter if your labor is big or small. If it's done with excellence, it becomes sacred. There are those who have riches but cannot enjoy them. There are those who work tirelessly but never find peace. Ecclesiastes 5:19 explains this clearly. Only God can give the power to enjoy what one has. True enjoyment does not come from accumulation, but from contentment. Biblical wisdom does not oppose prosperity, but subjects it to a greater purpose, to glorify the Creator. A wise heart recognizes every blessing as a gift, not a right. Joy comes from gratitude, not abundance. Ecclesiastes also confronts the idolatry of perfectionism. He who observes the wind will not sow. Ecclesiastes 11:4. Waiting for ideal conditions paralyzes. There will always be reasons to procrastinate, fears that whisper in the ear. But faith acts even in the midst of uncertainty. The wise farmer sows even when the sky is cloudy. Similarly, we must live, sowing good works, wise decisions, generosity and obedience, even when we don't see immediate results. He who plants with faith reaps with joy. Solomon teaches us that even leisure has its place. Feasts are made for laughter, and wine makes life merry. Ecclesiastes 10:19. This statement is not a license for indulgence, but a celebration of balance. Life is not only work, nor only rest. There is beauty in enjoying a good meal, a deep conversation, a moment of joy. Wisdom invites us to find joy in the simple, in the present, in the shared. When God is at the center, even the ordinary becomes eternal. However, the book also warns us that work without wisdom is wearisome. If the axe is dull, more strength is needed. Ecclesiastes 10:10. This metaphor reveals that preparation is as important as action. Some wear themselves out doing much without thinking, without direction, without reflection. But the wise stop, sharpen their tool, pray, plan, and grow. And then their efforts yield much more. Working without wisdom is wasting energy. Working with wisdom is building something lasting. Moreover, Ecclesiastes affirms, "Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might." Ecclesiastes 9:10. The time to act is now. After death, there will be no more opportunities to serve, love, sow, or transform. Each day is a blank page. Every task is an opportunity to leave a mark. Life is not measured by spectacular achievements, but by consistent faithfulness. Those who live with this awareness do not waste today waiting for a perfect tomorrow. They live with passion, honor their calling, and leave a legacy of purpose. Finally, the wise person highlights that joy is not a state to be reached at the end of the race, but a gift received along the way. There is nothing better than to rejoice and do good in his life. Ecclesiastes 3:12. Joy is not selfish when it comes from a heart that fears God. It is an expression of faith, of trust, that everything is in his hands. Learning to enjoy without guilt, to give thanks without comparing, and to work without slavery is a form of wisdom that transforms our relationship with life. The fear of God is the key to purpose. Ecclesiastes concludes with a phrase that sums up the entire spiritual journey of the book. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Ecclesiastes 12:13. This declaration is not an optional recommendation, but a radical revelation. The true meaning of life is not in pleasure, power, or human wisdom, but in living with reverence and obedience to the Creator. To fear God is not to live scared, but to live awake. It is to recognize that there is a God above all before whom we will give an account. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and its result is freedom. Not a libertine freedom, but a freedom that springs from living in alignment with heaven. When we fear God, our desires are purified, our decisions become clearer, and our steps firmer. That fear guards us from evil, teaches us to say no when everyone says yes, and to be silent when the world screams. It is an invisible shield that protects the soul from the subtlest traps of the ego. But this fear cannot be separated from obedience. Ecclesiastes reminds us that it is not enough to have emotions toward God. We must keep his commandments. Authentic spirituality is measured in concrete actions: to love, forgive, honor, serve, and be faithful. All of this is part of human duty. Solomon does not invite us to empty religiosity, but to a life lived before God with eternal purpose. Every commandment obeyed is a seed planted in the field of eternity. This reverent fear also changes the way we view judgment. For God will bring every work into judgment. Ecclesiastes 12:14. This is not a threat, but a promise of justice. Living with holy fear means knowing that nothing escapes God's notice. It is having the certainty that, even though the world may not see our pain or effort, God does. And he will reward each one according to their works. That is the hope of the righteous and the comfort of those who are faithful, even in secret. The fear of God also gives us a new perspective on pleasure. Ecclesiastes does not condemn joy, it sanctifies it. It teaches us that true joy comes when we live to please God. Eating, laughing, resting, working, all can be spiritual if done in reverence and gratitude. The fear of the Lord turns the ordinary into the extraordinary. It leads us to live with our feet on the earth and our eyes on heaven, knowing that every moment can be an act of worship. Furthermore, this fear produces contentment. When we understand that God is at the center of everything, we stop demanding that life make us happy. We begin to receive each day as a gift, not a right. This attitude transforms our relationships, our approach to work, and even the way we face death. The fear of the Lord frees us from the anxiety of control and fills us with a peace that surpasses all understanding. Finally, living with the fear of God preserves us from living for ourselves. In a self-centered world, Ecclesiastes calls us to an existence centered on Him. Living for God does not mean abandoning our dreams, but submitting them to His will. And it is there that we find true purpose, because apart from God everything is vanity, but with Him, even the smallest act has an eternal echo. eternity in the heart and the limitation of the earthly. Solomon, with all his wealth, power, and wisdom, reached a perplexing conclusion. None of these filled the void of the soul. In Ecclesiastes 3:11, he declares that God has put eternity in the hearts of men. This means that no human achievement, no matter how grand it may seem, will satisfy the deepest longing of the human soul, the desire to transcend. We were created for eternity, and that is why the finite will never be enough for us. This is a truth that confronts today's culture, obsessed with the here and now, immediate pleasure, and external recognition. That desire for eternity is a spiritual compass. It drives us to seek beyond the material, to ask why we are here, what the meaning of suffering is, and what the value of a life devoted to God is. The wisdom of Ecclesiastes is countercultural because it invites us to slow down, to look inward and upward, to understand that if we live only for this life, we lose everything. But if we live with eternity in mind, every day takes on new meaning. The book warns us that death is certain, inevitable, and democratic. The dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Ecclesiastes 12:7. This phrase, far from being fatalistic, is a call to awaken. We are not masters of time. We do not control the divine clock. Every heartbeat, every breath is an undeserved gift. Living with this awareness does not make us fearful, but wise. It moves us to prioritize, to forgive faster, to love more intentionally, and to live with our souls awake. In the same sense, Ecclesiastes 7:2 declares, "It is better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting, because sadness and loss confront us with what truly matters." While the feast entertains, mourning teaches. It reminds us that life is fragile, that time is limited, and that there are no promises for tomorrow. This wisdom is not gloomy, it is profound. It teaches us to stop postponing the essential and to value the eternal over the fleeting. And still, amidst all this serious reflection, the book does not take away our joy. It teaches us to find joy in the simple things, that a man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. This is the gift of God. Ecclesiastes 3:13. This is a clean, sober, steady joy. It does not depend on grand achievements, but on recognizing God's hand in every detail. It is possible to be deeply aware of the brevity of life, and at the same time, deeply grateful for it. We are also exhorted not to live as prisoners of the past. Do not say, "Why were the former days better than these?" Ecclesiastes 7:10. Nostalgia can become an emotional prison that prevents us from seeing the new opportunities God is opening. The wise live in the present, learn from the past, but do not anchor themselves to it. Because God is the God of now, the one who makes all things new. Wisdom acknowledges the value of what has been lived, but is also open to what is coming. Finally, the book dismantles all human arrogance. It reminds us that we are not the center of the universe, that we do not control the outcomes, and that everything is vanity of vanities when lived disconnected from God. This perspective does not impoverish us, it enriches us. It brings us back to the essentials. It invites us to lift our eyes to the heavens and walk with humility, because only when we recognize our smallness are we ready to embrace the greatness of an eternal purpose. Generosity, humility, and wisdom that endures. And Ecclesiastes presents a curious and powerful image. Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Ecclesiastes 11:1. This metaphor speaks to us of a brave generosity, one that does not expect immediate reward. Giving, blessing, sowing goodness without human guarantees is one of the greatest demonstrations of faith. The wise give without counting, love without demanding, and sow without conditions, because they know that God forgets no act done with sincerity. Everything given in love becomes an eternal seed. This generosity also requires humility. Solomon insists, "Better is the rebuke of the wise than the song of fools." Ecclesiastes 7:5. Receiving correction is one of the clearest marks of wisdom. It's not always pleasant, but it's always necessary. Those who allow themselves to be corrected grow. Those who listen with an open heart avoid falling into greater mistakes. On the other hand, those who only seek praise and applause end up losing themselves. True greatness is forged in the fire of humility. Another powerful lesson from the book is that the end of a thing is better than its beginning. Ecclesiastes 7-8. Starting is easy, finishing well is not. It requires patience, persistence, and character. This teaching encourages us not to give up in the midst of the process. To understand that the value of something is measured by its fruit, not just by its promise. And that God honors those who remain faithful until the end. Those who walk with purpose and persevere in obscurity will be publicly rewarded by the Lord. Solomon also warns that a little folly can ruin much wisdom, Ecclesiastes 10:1. This reminds us of how fragile a good reputation can be and how crucial consistency is. It's not just about knowing what is right, but about living it. One unthoughtful act can spoil years of integrity. Therefore, spiritual vigilance is not paranoia, it's wisdom. Watching what we say, how we act, what we allow into our hearts, these are all part of the call to live wisely. And in contrast to strength, wisdom shines as a superior protection. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, Ecclesiastes 9:18. It's not human strategies that guarantee victory, but the discernment that comes from God. A wise word can avoid a conflict, a prudent decision can save a family, and an act of humility can restore what seemed lost. Divine wisdom is an invisible defense that many despise, but the discerning soul embraces with gratitude. Moreover, Ecclesiastes acknowledges that money has its use, but it is not the answer to everything, Ecclesiastes 10:19. This affirmation is crucial in a world that idolizes wealth. Money can solve practical matters, but it does not bring peace, purpose, or meaning. The wise do not despise money, but they do not worship it. They use it responsibly with gratitude and generosity, because they know that in the end, the value of a life is not measured by possessions, but by the eternal impact of its decisions. And to close, the book gives us an invaluable gem. There is nothing better than to rejoice and do good in one's life, Ecclesiastes 3:12. To live with joy, with goodness, with spiritual lightness. This is wisdom. True wisdom does not weigh, does not burden, does not demand more than can be given. It teaches us to enjoy what we have, to let go of what does not belong to us, and to walk with God in every season. Because in the end, what remains is not what we possess, but what we sow from the heart. Reflexión final. La sabiduría eterna. Después de escuchar todas estas verdades poderosas de Eclesiastés, la gran pregunta es, ¿cómo estás viviendo tu vida? ¿Estás acumulando vanidades que se desvanecen con el tiempo o estás sembrando sabiduría que permanece para la eternidad? Hoy, el Espíritu Santo te llama a reflexionar, a despertar, a ordenar tus prioridades y a dejar de vivir en automático. Porque la vida no se trata de tener más, sino de temer a Dios, obedecer su voz y disfrutar con gratitud cada día que Él te da. Haz una pausa, mira a tu alrededor. ¿Qué estás haciendo con tu tiempo, con tus talentos, con tu alma? ¿Estás viviendo para impresionar a otros o para honrar al Creador? Eclesiastés no es un libro oscuro, es una luz que revela el camino que pocos quieren recorrer, el de la sabiduría eterna, aquella que te guía cuando todos están perdidos, aquella que no cambia con las modas, aquella que transforma lo simple en algo eterno. ¿Te atreves a vivir diferente? ¿A confiar en los tiempos de Dios? ¿A recibir con gozo la reprensión que edifica y a sembrar generosidad sin esperar reconocimiento? La recompensa de esta sabiduría no es solo paz interior, sino un legado que trasciende generaciones. No sigas corriendo detrás del viento. El sentido de tu vida no está lejos, está en la presencia de Dios. Aplica estas verdades, vívelas. Y si este mensaje tocó tu corazón, escríbelo en los comentarios. Quiero vivir con sabiduría eterna. Dale like al video, suscríbete al canal y activa las notificaciones. Aquí seguimos creciendo juntos en la palabra, descubriendo los tesoros que transforman la vida desde adentro hacia afuera.